Hi, this is Vince Baer. Today I'm interviewing Shane Reed, and Shane is the author of a new book called I Almost Died. And then a tagline says, it says a COVID, but the word COVID is crossed out. It's a God story of how God delivered Shane during COVID. While many of us were glued to the TV, CNN, watching what was happening with COVID, Shane was actually living through COVID. And this book chronicles Shane's healing from COVID. So we look forward to hearing what Shane has to say. So Shane, welcome to the interview.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Thanks.
Probably a key word for this interview would be the word confine. And so this book is an excellent book for anyone who is confined, maybe physically. Originally, it came from Shane's experiences in the hospital, but it's equally well suited to someone who might be incarcerated or confined with health problems at home or confined financially. So I want you to think about anyone who struggles with any kind of confinement, and then just know that this is a book that's written for those kind of people. So Shane, let's go through some questions here for you.
Sure.
Maybe go over your home life, your church involvement, what you do for a living.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Shane. I'm 51. I've been married almost 23 years to my favorite human on the planet. I have 3 kids. We've run a small group in our home for about a decade, and I also serve teaching in kids ministry at church.
Great.
As far as my career, I've been a photographer for about 20 years.
Okay. More specifically, a wedding photographer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you do any other kind of photography?
Yeah, I do families. I do commercial if I like the job, but mostly weddings have been my bread and butter.
Okay. Very good. So the title of the book is interesting in that it uses a slang word. The title is I Almost Died, So where did you come up with the title of the book?
Yeah, so sort of a funny story. I do tell the story in the book, so you should get the book. But essentially, we were at our friend's house, and after coming out of the hospital, I realized that it was a very powerful phrase. If I wanted something like a favorite meal or dessert, I'd tell my wife, I almost died. If I didn't want to go somewhere, I said, I almost died. So depending on the tone of how I said it, it becomes sort of a bit of a manipulation tool, sure, but also a running joke in our
Right.
home. Yeah.
Excellent. The cover artwork is interesting because it's very simple. And to me, it looks like a tiger. Was there any kind of that intent in the choosing of your
Yeah.
cover?
So, yeah, there was no wildlife intent. I basically just wanted it to be bold. I wanted it to be eye-catching. It's not a tiger, it's actually a fingerprint, which represents identity, being known, being his.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Now, this book is interesting because Shane is very into artwork. So Shane gets to write his own book and he gets to choose his own artwork for the book. So we see a lot of Shane in this book here. When did this happen? What year was this?
Yeah, it was late 21, just after Christmas. That probably made it harder on my family for me to leave in the holidays, but honestly, when something like that hits, there really is no such thing as good time. Nobody has a good time to be sick, right?
No, but some
yeah.
things can exacerbate the crisis.
Yeah, for sure. Like life as I knew it, like it was hard for them, maybe harder initially, but for me, life came to a grinding halt pretty quickly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So from the time that you knew you had some symptoms to the time that you were admitted, how much time was there?
Yeah, just a few days.
Just a few days?
Yeah, my breathing.
So it happened pretty fast.
My breathing declined pretty quick.
Okay. All right. Now, the other thing about this story is that his longtime mentor, Arnott, passed away what was it, weeks or days after you were admitted to the hospital?
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
Couple of weeks. So,
Yeah.
like, and how long was Arnott your mentor?
Over 20 years. Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah.
So what was going through your mind in the hospital, and your rock, your best friend, passes away?
Well, it was crushing, you know. He was like a father to me. It was sort of just burden on top of burden. And, you know, at the time, it felt like more than I can bear, honestly. You know, he's always been a steady voice in my life and, you know, an example. And, you know, I always look back and think that only God would take a ex-juvenile delinquent and pair him up with a guy like that. You know what I mean?
Okay. Now, we might want to add the fact that you didn't have a father. Did you grow up with a father? Or?
No, I didn't.
You did. So that makes Arnott more special than I would think.
Yes.
And just we're on the topic of Arnott, Arnott just did his Christian duty for 20 years mentoring a young person. So Arnott doesn't know anything about this book here, right? But this book came because Arnott put in that time for 20 years trying to mentor you into who you are today. So if there was no Arnott, there likely wouldn't be any book like this.
I don't know.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
So that's kudos to any of the people who are mentors to any young people growing up. Your life could have a significant input. You might not see it right now, but down the road, you'll find out about the impact that you had on a person's life. Now, let's talk about medication and hallucinations and withdrawal. Side effects from medication can sometimes complicate a crisis. You devoted 3 chapters to hallucinations and another to withdrawal process after leaving the hospital. Would you like to share any experience with those transitions?
Sure. Yeah. So coming off sedatives is heavy. You know, it comes with extreme nightmares, confusion, panic. There's 3 of them. It might seem like a little overkill, but I think it gives some psychological insight of what it's like to come off coma-inducing sedatives and how just your reality is radically skewed. You know, what is a normal procedure they're doing to you seems like something out of a Stephen King novel.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to read the book and read those 3 chapters because they're very insightful about what's going through a person's mind. Chapter 21 is entitled Win. In chapter 21, you solve a very difficult problem, preaching the gospel without a tongue. Can you share the details of that specific win in your life?
Yeah, so after many weeks of lying in a hospital bed feeling like a lump, I needed a sense of purpose.
Right.
I decided I wanted to share my faith with those caring for me, but the major problem was a tracheostomy in my throat and the inability to speak. But thankfully, the clergyman from the hospital brought me a Bible that I could actually hold because mine was too heavy. And he brought me another book called Words of Comfort. So I found, I think it was a Good News translation of Psalm 51. And I just realized I could convince people to read the prayer of repentance as an opportunity to, you know, hear the gospel.
Right. Now, some people might not be aware of the impact of that psalm. So what is that psalm about?
After David committed adultery with Bathsheba and killed her husband by putting him on the front lines of the battle, God basically, you know, dealt with David and he was convicted and he basically went before God and just basically poured his heart out and recognized that the sin ultimately was against God.
Right. So you had unsuspecting nurses or workers take 5 minutes and read that psalm to you, and inadvertently they were hearing the impact of a true contrition of a person. And now, in chapter 41, you quote a very insightful quote by G. Michael Hoff, and the quote goes like this. It's a bit of a mind twister. It says, Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times. So would you like to share with us what that quote means to you?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Hard times expose you. You know, they strip you down. They show what metal you're made of. That's where actually strength gets built, right? Strength
Right.
gets built in seasons of suffering. Comfort feels great at the time, but it doesn't really grow you. I really look at that quote sort of and pair it with Romans 5:3 and 4, which says, we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, fortitude, right? The
Right.
ability to press on, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope.
Yes.
And the Bible says that hope in God does not disappoint. So
Yep.
it's really no different than working out, right? A guy goes into the gym. The goal is to stress his muscle, tear the tissue to produce growth and strength through adversity. And faith works the same way.
Right. Good. Now, chapter 39 is entitled Mountaintop Living. Can you share what was happening in your life at that point?
Yeah, I'd been out of the hospital several months. It was fall. It was right after our annual trip to Lake Huron. We go there every year with the family. I woke up every day for months just with joy and just gratitude at an all-time high, just recognizing how God had so tenderly carried me through the storm and met me in some moments that were heavy beyond my capabilities,
Right.
Yeah.
Good. And then chapter 42 is a special chapter because it's simply entitled Jenny.
Mhm.
So can you talk about the impact that Jenny had on your recovery?
Well, Jenny's my favorite person, She's my best friend. She's my world. She's my rock. She, after this season, really, she's my hero, She just so tenderly cared for me. She was just a steady, faithful, person for me in that season. And, there was never a complaint, never a sigh, never a roll of the eyes, just servanthood like I've never seen it before. And it was really something to behold.
Nice. Now, were there difficult times that Jenny went through? She was faithful in being there for you, but were there some times when it looked pretty? Because I remember I was going to Hope Niagara at the time, and every week they were saying, "You got to pray for Shane some more. This is happening." So it was up and down. It was like a roller coaster, somewhat for Jenny, I think.
Yeah, and she was super strong through it all. I'm sure she had moments, and in solitude where I'm sure she broke down, because I think that's only human. But
Sure.
I think overall, she really never was willing to accept the fact that the Lord was going to take me. Yeah.
Interesting how that didn't rock her faith.
Mm-hmm.
Now, chapter 49 is entitled Dumb. How did dumb impact your recovery?
Yeah. So I had weaned off all the prescribed medication that I received from the doctors. I come home with a lot of meds, and we weaned one at a time. Finally, it was all over. And honestly, during this time, all the medications were gone, and I felt like I was halfway to a lobotomy, like I just mentally, I couldn't remember anything really from past. I couldn't tell stories like I could. I couldn't really, I was struggling to learn and, adapt to new things. And I really couldn't figure out what was going on. Like, my mind's usually going all the time and fast, like a Porsche engine in a Pinto, because I'm getting older, right? So, so typically I would be quick on my feet, funny, and everything that I felt made me was stripped away. I looked in the mirror. I didn't know the guy looking back at me, and it really shook me. It was very crushing. But long story short, it was the melatonin gummies that I had taken as an extra sleep aid for a couple of years, shut my brain down. So, yeah.
Melatonin.
So I went off that, and within a few days, I was firing on all cylinders again.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been, you must have been super happy at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. And then uh, during chapters 50 and 51, they're entitled God's Not Fair 1 and God's Not Fair 2.
Hmm.
And that drills down on what it means to have a vital relationship with God. Can you talk a bit about that perspective?
Sure, yeah. A lot of people, you hear the phrase God's not fair, right? You know, something happens that you don't like in life, and a lot of times even people that don't believe in God seem to blame God, you know, and God's not unfair. We just misunderstand what fair is. You know, if God gave us what we actually deserved, you know, we'd be in trouble and no one would be able to stand before him. And that's really why Jesus matters and why he came to die. He came to take what we deserve so we could receive from him a gift we could never earn. You know, salvation's eternal life. Salvation's a free gift. It's not about being good, it's about receiving, and that's God's grace.
Right. So there's one more thing I'd like to talk about. Shane, can you talk to us about the intubation process? That was it was scary for us learning about it, and it must have been scary for you considering that you might have to be intubated.
Yeah, it was scary for me. Of course, I had seen the news and I knew that oftentimes when you're put on a ventilator, the outcomes were less than optimal. A lot of people were dying. So, you know, like, sure, it was scary. I think in the moment I was more concerned that they wanted to shave off my beard. And I joked and told them to call the whole thing off. Got a little chuckle. I don't know how many people in a moment like that can have a few seconds of levity, but, you know, I think the hardest part was, you know, calling Jenny and saying goodbye. She didn't want me to. That was heavy, you know. She didn't believe it was goodbye. Saying goodbye to my kids while not actually being able to say it, you know, just that was rough because we didn't really want to, you know, frighten them. You know, they were already in a fragile state. They had limited information and we didn't want to go beyond a certain point and, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, as far as what it's like to be intubated, basically they put you out. They put a tube down your throat, a breathing tube, and you're on a ventilator. It was supposed to be a handful of days. It turned into 21 days. I was in an induced coma. It took about 5 days before I noticed somebody and actually knew who somebody was. It's a slow process, weaning off those drugs. And yeah, you don't know how the person's going to come out the other side. There can be, you know, brain damage, muscle damage, nerve damage, like just there's a lot of variables.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Initially, I really couldn't, you know, I couldn't do a lot, right? I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink, I could barely move. I couldn't have visitors. I had a blocked gallbladder, so I had a tube in my right side draining that. It was completely blocked. In my left side, I had a feeding tube. I had tubes in all the private areas. I also, during intubation, got a lung infection, a kidney infection. My kidneys failed. So, you know, people, you know, clearly see a miracle, which I can't really deny.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Tell us what it was like to write the book, because you might not realize it, Shane, but this is an amazing book. I love the book and I want to reread the book. And can you tell us, what did it feel like? You were inspired by God somehow to write the book?
Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't hear a voice, you know, yell down from heaven. I didn't really hear anything within. I just had I don't know, an urge, a yearning inside of me that I needed to tell my story.
Right.
And that started at the beginning of August. And a couple of weeks later, when I sat down at my keyboard, I wrote the first draft in 12 days, 50,000 words. And then I spent 10 months, and I think it ended at about 95,000. So, yeah.
Wow.
So it was a bit of a download that happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I just see a lot of value in this book, and So how can people get this book? What's the cost of it?
Yeah, the cost is $25. It's
Okay.
on Amazon now, so you can go on Amazon.ca or .com if you're from the US. So yeah, you can
Okay.
go there. I also have a website now, shaneCreed.com. So you can go to my website and click the Amazon link and
Okay.
read a little more about me if you
Right.
want to.
Right. Now, do you give discounts for people that buy quantities of the book?
Yeah, I would be willing to offer
Okay.
a discount.
Because I want to
yes.
buy 5 books right now off you.
Done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I want them to be handy so that if I see someone in need, this is going to be an instant blessing to people that read this book who are, like I said, confined in any way.
Mhm.
This is such a well-written book, and so God used you masterfully. I've written a book, so I know how hard it is to write a book, and this book is just flawless. I love this book. So, and speaking of books, you have another book that you've
Yeah, I
finished.
did. Yeah, I actually just finished a second book. It's actually another memoir. It's my life up to COVID.
Oh,
It's called Even Through the Cracks. And with it, I'm also launching a 7-week field guide for men. It's a companion to Even Through the Cracks. It's written for those that are tired of managing their brokenness, hiding their sin, and are ready to surrender it. It's full of, hard questions about the labels you've worn. A lot of us, depending how we grew up, carry labels. The wounds you've buried, the patterns you're justifying, and it's all filtered through the truth of the gospel. I wouldn't say it'll be comfortable, but I'm an honest guy. But on the other side of honesty is freedom, the kind Jesus can give, and that's coming out soon this spring.
okay. And
Yeah.
what's the title of that book?
Even Through the Cracks.
Even Through the Cracks.
Mm-hmm.
Can you finally maybe share how your church was responsive to the deep need that your family was in at that moment?
Yeah, our church was, beyond gracious to our family. They afforded Jenny all the time she needed to care for me when I come home. And, the outpouring of love and generosity and food that overflowed the freezer, it was just, I don't know. I didn't get to experience that part because I was lying in the bed, but, I can only imagine it was something to behold.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And your pastor wrote the intro or the
foreword.
the
yes.
foreword. I think he did a great job in writing the
Yeah.
foreword.
He's
Pastor-
good with words. He's a pastor.
He's a pastor, Pastor Ross Kearney.
Yeah.
So well done.
Yeah.
I want to see this book go into every prison, every hospital room. Everyone who's struggling with a long-lasting problem should read this book.
Mm.
So, way to go, Shane.
Yeah.
So, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
this book.
Yeah, I just hope it encourages people.
Oh, it'll do more than that. Yeah. All right. So, we look forward to the next interview for the next book.
Sounds good.
All right.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Vince.